Mr. Naim Jina from the Afro-Middle East Center in South Africa. We have Samir Hajuj, Palestine activist. We have Rabbi Yaakov Nagen from the Bliki Institute for Interfaith Dialogue. And in Indonesian sides, we have Bang Zaki and Bang Sofwan. Thank you for your willingness to participate on this. Ladies and gentlemen, Palestinians is always close issues for the Indonesians. We always support the discussions, and Indonesians' positions or official positions is to support the independence of Palestine. And ILUNI UI, as the biggest and the oldest university, Universitas of Indonesia, have an important role not only on the domestic issues, but also in participating on the international issues. And like the purpose of Policy Center is to discuss, to bring the hot topics that currently make the news in Indonesia and invite relevant speakers so we can understand and know directly from the experts, from the main source of the issues, and hopefully we can provide a clearer understanding and also perspective for our stakeholders, which is first, of course, the alumni of Universitas of Indonesia, and also as the main objective of Policy Center of ILUNI, we intend and already provide several advice to our government on how to approach certain topics, and hopefully we also can do the same on these issues. And before the opening of this meeting, I have a privilege to talk a little bit with Rabbi Yaakov Nagen, that the intentions of this, firstly, is to end the violence, to promote the humanitarian approach. We know there is a political aspect, religious aspects, and many other aspects in this long, not yet it's disputes, but also in the issues mainly. But of course, we want to work toward, and we want to have a better future. And in the meantime, we want to reiterate that humanitarian approach and discussion should be the way to go. I just watched a movie in Netflix before. It's in Oslo. It's a good it's a good way how we can approach this. That we have a back channel open. Of course, the official discussions will need to continue, but there is a lot of progress if can be achieved if we have a good relations between peoples that have a role on this. And hopefully that's something we can achieve tonight, and we can have at least, if not official channel, it's a back channel between everybody's here, and we can get informations, we can confirm informations, and we can provide solutions if necessary. So I hope we can have a good discussions tonight. Terima kasih bagi para peserta yang sudah menghadiri kegiatan Forum Diskusi Salemba ini. Semoga kita semua bisa mendapatkan manfaat dan bisa memberikan kontribusi kita kepada alma mater dan kepada bangsa, dan juga sekarang kepada perdamaian dunia. Mudah-mudahan. Terima kasih. Have a good discussions tonight. Wish you all luck, and in this pandemic conditions, we also wish you all good health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Raffi. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Before I say anything else, Devendra, is your microphone working at the moment? Okay. So if that's not the case, I will continue. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Andre Rahadian, for your wise words of hope and faith and discussion. Indeed, when we talk about fostering between humanity and hope, we always can look inside the nuances of a country. Behind every country is a group of people, and behind every group of people is a family, families, and behind those families are lives. And this is an important discussion to always have, whether it might be through faith, through freedom, and many other topics that are seen within the context of this pressing issue. And as moderator, I am once again very honored to welcome such a diverse, experienced, and dedicated assembly of experts who I hope can share their experiences, their knowledge, and as our chairman has said, give clarity on the situation. Because after all, in order for us to actually find a solution, dialogue, discussion, and an exchange of thoughts with clear minds and a clear heart will always bring through a notion of fruitful progress. Now, this is a complex issue that we are facing, one that has been marred for decades, and perhaps we will see dark days tomorrow. But at the very least, we can all gather together virtually and find out what we can do today. Before I hand over the discussion to the fellow panelists, let me just close by quoting Desmond Tutu, who said that hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. And I hope that this discussion will shed light on as many dimensions as possible. Thank you. Now, I think it would be wonderful if we could hear from Rabbi Yaakov Magen first. Rabbi, the floor is yours.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. I'm very grateful to be with you today. And Rafi, you speak so beautifully. It was a pleasure to hear your English. And I'm sure in Indonesian, you speak even more beautifully.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I think one of the great insights that we could learn from the failure of the peace process between Israelis and Palestinians is that religion is part of the problem, and therefore religion must be part of the solution. When is religion part of the problem? If one believes that your God is different than my God, that you are rejected by my God, my belief will separate between us, will make us into enemies. But if we believe that it is the same God who I love and pray to, who loves me, is the God who you believe in and pray, then our belief should be a source of connection. Now, on the surface, between Judaism and Islam, our beliefs should be connecting us because our books have such respect for each other. Whether it is the Quran, who refers to the Jewish people as Ahlu Kitab, the people of the book, who mentions the Prophet Moses 135 times in the Quran, or even in the Quran, teaches us in the 29th surah, it says, tell Ahlu Kitab, tell the people of the book, your God and our God are one. And in Jewish sources, the greatest Jewish rabbi of the Rambam has great praise for the pure belief of Islam in the unity of God without blemish. We also, Jews and Arabs, look at each other as family. In Hebrew, Jews refer to Arabs as Bnei Dodim, which means our cousins, acknowledging that we are children of Abraham through Isaac, and Arabs which include, of course, the Palestinians, Muslims are children of Abraham through Ishmael. So why do we have so many problems? Because all these truths are in our heads, but they don't go down into our hearts. And this is because of the conflict, the suffering and violence, and of both sides has led to fear and hatred that has led to disconnection. So I think I would like to share 3 words with you, which I think are the essence. You could forget everything else I say, but please remember the 3 words I want to share with you. I was at a conference once in Amman, Jordan. There is a wonderful organization called the United Religions Initiative. It is composed of 1,000 grassroots organizations with more than 1 million members. And the conference for the Middle East was held in Amman, Jordan. We had a representative of every country from the Middle East. And here, this is a picture from that meeting. And in this meeting, there are 3 words that I think this is the essence of it all. In English, connection before correction. Connection before correction. The great problem between Israelis and Palestinians is deep disconnection, fear and hatred because of suffering. If we want to overcome this, we must start first with connection. There is a story in a saying in Pakistan that when you want to do business with somebody, you should drink 3 cups of tea. The first cup we drink as strangers. The second cup as friends. The third cup we drink as family. And with family, we could do business. People often blame the leaders. Why is there no peace? But to bring peace, the leaders will not bring peace. We have to start with the people. Connection before correction. Or as the great Muslim poet Rumi has said, beyond ideas of right thinking, beyond ideas of wrong thinking, there is a field. There we will meet. And I would like to speak about 2 areas where Indonesia is already playing an important role in this connection. The first there was one of the leaders, I understand, of Islam in Indonesia, which of course is the largest Islamic country in the world, is Haj Yahya Khalil Stakuf, the Secretary General of the Indonesian Nalatu Ulama. And he once saw an interfaith event in the Holy Land with Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Muslims. And he said if they would do something like this again, he would come from Indonesia to Israel, Palestine, to be part of it. And in the old city of Jerusalem, in the Tower of David Museum, in his honor, had a event of singing, an interfaith event to be held on Eid al-Fitr, the last day of Ramadan. And they brought 800 Jews, Christians, and Muslims to sing together a song of connection and peace. I was privileged to be the representative of the Jewish people. We have Haj Yahya Khalil Stakuf representing Islam, and we have a representative of Christianity, and hundreds of Israelis and Palestinians were there together. And maybe now, since music is more important than words, maybe let's see a short clip from that event. So please, isn't working, perhaps it can be sent to someone else to open it. Now again.
I think there is one button you need to click so we can hear the voice for the video.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, David, I think enough. So if we talk about, and that visit of Yahya Khalil Stakaf, since that event has taken place, the city of the Tower of David Museum in Jerusalem has every month has been having interfaith discussions between Jewish, Muslims, and Christian leaders, all inspired by this visit from Indonesia. And part of the challenge, if we talk about Jerusalem and the recent crisis, again, if we know that the Al-Aqsa, Jerusalem, is sacred to Islam, this is the site which, according to the surah, the Prophet Muhammad rose up to heaven. And for Jews, this is the site of the ancient temple of the King Solomon. So again, we could say this is a debate. Is this a Jewish site or a Muslim site? But again, a different looking at our deep connections, could see that it is the blessing, seeing the connection of our brothers. The Bible in the book of Isaiah says that the Temple Mount should be a house of prayer. In Hebrew, Bet Tfilah L'Kol Amim, a house of prayer for people of the world. To see that Islam sees this as a holy spot, this should not be a problem for the Jewish people. This is a great blessing that believers in the same God come and pray in this holy spot. On the other hand, in the Quran, the site in the surah that tells about the going up of heaven going to the faraway mosque, Al-Aqsa, that it relates to the Jewish people and the temple that stood there. So this site, it is not a competition. This site, we should see the other person's connection as part of what makes this place more holy. The king of Jordan, King Hussein, was a very, very spiritual peacemaker, and very beloved by the people of Jordan, and also very beloved in Israel at the time. He suggested, let us say that this spot is connected to God. And I think thinking, for example, along these lines, could see that a source of violence and tension could and should be a site of connection. For many years, there was an event held in Jerusalem called the Jerusalem Hug, where Israelis and Palestinians would come together and make a human circle to hug the walls of the old city of Jerusalem to say, Al-Quds, the city of the holy, we want this to connect us and not to divide us. And here, Google every year makes a film summarizing the year. And tens of millions of people see what are the pictures most seen that year on Google? And the one picture from the Middle East was a picture from that event, the Jerusalem hug. So please, David, maybe the beginning and then go and skip to save time to the 3940. So here, in we search to make sense. This is the picture from at the Jerusalem hug. I'm with my friend Ibrahim Abu Hawa from the Palestinian, from the Mountain of Olives neighborhood. And here, this is an attempt to say, we want our Islam and Judaism. We want our Jewish and Arab identity to say, we are not enemies. We are connected to build a future for both of us. And I think one critical truth that must be accepted by Israelis and by Palestinians, by Jews and Muslims, first to acknowledge that the Holy Land, that both Islam, Palestinians, and Jews and Israelis, we are both connected to the land. We cannot deny the other's connection to the land. We also have to acknowledge that we share in the suffering. The Palestinians have greatly suffered and Israelis have greatly suffered. In my town where I live, in my school, 10 of my students have been killed by terrorist attacks alone. And so many Palestinians have been killed in violence. And we must also accept we both have a responsibility to try to overcome. We cannot only blame the other side. We are shared in the responsibility, we are shared in the suffering, and we are shared in the connection to the land. But one more point of Indonesia's positive role. Part of the debate, because of politics, often the true teachings, for example, of the Quran, about Alu Kitab, about the people of the book, sometimes because of politics, have been covered up. But in Indonesia, by being further away from the context, it is easier to look directly to the word of God. And Indonesian scholars for more than 100 years have been doing important scholarship about the Quran and what the Quran teaches us about Jews and Muslims and their relations. So here I asked David to show just a copy of an article. We're not, of course, not going to read the article, but this is an article that puts together Indonesian Islamic scholars talking about Jewish-Muslim relations, because I feel this is really the heart. I work on teaching Jews about how we should relate to Islam, to teach what Islam is truly about, because we know there is so much falsehood in the West about what is Islam. To show them how Islam is a book, so they should learn about the Quran and how much the true message of the Quran. I work on the Jewish side to get greater respect for Islam and Islamic traditions, to see them that their story is part of our story. And here in Indonesia, as in other places in the world, more and more showing that for Islam, again, the Jews, this is not our competitors. There is a big story that Judaism and Islam, we are part of a bigger story. And when we acknowledge this, our beliefs can bring us together. And I feel, and let me get to the end of my lecture because we have many other important speakers. I would like to give my vision for resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I feel there are three lessons from the failure of the Oslo Accords. Number one, we need to start not from above, from the leaders. We must start below, from the people, because if the people are disconnected, we will not make peace. So first, we need person-to-person connection and massive interfaith, meeting each other, knowing each other, because there are so many lies that people tell about each other. So first of all, we need a bottom-up approach. Number two, we must use our religious identities to connect us and not separate us. And number three, we must break out of what is called a zero-sum game. I once spoke to a major Palestinian sheikh from Al-Khalil, from Hebron, and he said, if we separate, we cannot say that what is mine is not yours and what is yours is not mine. We must find a solution that it is not, that we don't disconnect anybody from the whole. So in 2 minutes, and I finish with this, I think we need a confederation of Israel and Palestine, not two countries that are disconnected, but two countries that are connected in something bigger, which connects us to our shared identity. In Europe, we have different countries. Let us say France and Germany, they have their own country, but they are part of something bigger, the European Union. We need in the Holy Land for there to be an Israel, for there to be a Palestine, but not countries, but part of an Abrahamic union, because Jews respect Abraham, Muslims respect Abraham. This is my identity as an Israeli Jew and your identity as a Palestinian Arab Muslim. This is our connection. So this is my vision, not disconnection, but connection, to find a way to heal and respect all parties here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Nagin, for the wonderful lecture. At the heart of your lecture, what I see is, beyond all our differences, everyone shares a great faith in religion, a great faith in humanity. And that core component is an issue that we can unite upon together. And through the discussion, whether through cultural relations or even through fostering friendships, can be an important first step. Rabbi, I do have a couple of questions for you, especially
Please.
on your issues on how we are actually going to develop a sort of confederation, but I'll hold my tongue for a little while, as you say that we have a number of esteemed panelists. But once again, Rabbi, I thank you, and I hope that we can circle back to you and we can have a two-way discussion. At the very least, I remember a quote from Rumi who says that the most beautiful word that we can hear is to listen. So the next panelist, I'd like to give the floor to an Indonesian scholar, Mr. Zaki Khairul Umam, who is an academic and an expert in Middle East issues. Mr. Umam, you have the floor. Mr. Umam, yes.
Yes.
Hello. Good evening. Apa kabar Bapak? Selamat malam.
Baik, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Selamat malam kawan-kawan. Thank you very much for inviting me to this. I think this is the first time perhaps for conducting the English session for Israeli-Palestinian conflicts in a more maybe plural context. There is a Jewish rabbi, and also there is also Palestinian. There's also some, speakers from South Africa, Professor Naim Jinnah, and myself, and also Dr. Sofan Albana. I'm really interested in what Rabbi Yaakov said about the confederation, as Rafi Saif also was interested in these topics, but maybe we can, ask this question later. From my view, actually, I'm sorry. I'm not providing PowerPoint to provide you some points of my perspective regarding the Middle Eastern context about this crisis, Israeli and Palestinian crisis during the past Ramadan until Idul Fitri. But I think what has been said by Dr. Yakub, I'm personally believing that the interfaith and also intercultural dialogue, intellectual exchange, etc., is very important in order to connect people with people, especially between Muslims, Jews, Christian, etc., and especially in the Israeli-Palestinian side between the Israeli Arabs and Jews. Myself, for example, I studied a lot of things about the Islamic history related to Jewish people and also Jewish philosophy and thought, especially the philosophy of Rambam, Rabbi Moses ben Maimun in the medieval Spain. And the history is fascinating in the way that there was a lot of, cooperation and collaboration between Islamic and Jewish thinkers and also figures in the past, either in the intellectual side, but also in the political context. But I think if we look at the current situation, in the contemporary situation, I think there is the need to, emphasize on the way we maybe broaden or extend the meaning of dialogue. What is the meaning of the meaningful dialogue between Jews and also Muslim? I myself, for example, the big fan of the interfaith and how we cultivate not only our own tradition regarding the Jews and the Christians as the children of Abraham, for example. We know that Yaakov also is the name of in Islam, in Arabic is Yaqub, which is who is one of the great prophet, the son of Ishaq. And also in history there are a lot of stories like that. This is very important, especially when I when I participated in one program. It was in 2014 until 2013 until 14. There was collaboration between Palestinian, Israeli, and German state. They, created a program, something like intellectual encounters, which one of the aim is to bridge between the students, the activists of Palestinian and Israeli, in order to get the broader view of Islamic history in the past, which was very vibrant, very rich, and there is a lot of dialogue, there is a lot of cooperation between Jews and Muslim. This is one thing, but another thing is that we need, I think, more effort in order to have some meaningful coexistence, in the way that, from my point of view, for example, there is a strong belief for me and also many other the actors or activists who are participating in the interfaith dialogue, as Rabbi Yaakov said, but we need, I think, to cooperate more in the issue of justice. So adalah in Arabic, of course. This is one, I think, missing point that need to be cultivated more in the context of interreligious cooperation. So what was happening, for example, in the context of the Middle East, especially, I think, in the past few years, about the Abrahamic Accord. that was stated and also signed by a few Arab countries, for example, Uni Emirat Arab, United Arab Emirates, and also Bahrain. There's also a number of Arab countries or African countries like Sudan and also Morocco joining this Abrahamic Accord in order to normalizing the relation between Arab countries and also Israel. This is a good one in the context that there is, state or multilateral solution in order to get, connected between people, at least between states and people in the Middle East, especially between Arabs and the Jews. But the most important things, I think, if we want to criticize, for example, from the Abrahamic Accord, it is also one of the initiative from the policy of, the President Trump. There is no, symmetry of power between the Palestinian and Israel. This is one thing. And the other thing is that if you would like to have some genuine voice about the Abrahamic peace or Abrahamic children, etc., we need to talk more about what happens in the realities in the Palestinian side, for example. We know there are a lot of, problems of annexation, problems of, inequality, problems of injustice, problem of division. I think Rabbi Jacob also agree a lot about we need more to have created more equal societies. There is no division, etc. And I think this is the time for us in order to talk more about this, more specifically and more, down to earth about the problems, what happens in Sheikh Jarrah, for example. So what happens not only in Sheikh Jarrah, but also in Gaza, etc. Of course, there is debates, a lot of debates in social media about the defense, the right to defense for the Israel, and also supported by many governments in European and also in the American context. But here, I think we need to have more symmetry of power between Palestinian and Israel in order to get realistic about the idea of the Abrahamic Accord more, meaningfully. This is the challenging and maybe also the possible solution in order to get, as Rabbi Yaakov said, we need to have built more from bottom up bridge or solution. And also this is also the problem of connectivity there. And as we know from the past, I think the past 1 month, from the middle of Ramadan until now, there is Sheikh Jarrah becoming a litmus test, I think, for redeveloping something like international consciousness between people around the world. So people in Indonesia, for example, including Muslims, Christians, I think many other as well, they see Palestinians' problem as their problems, as the problems of humanity. There is no problem of, for example, hatred toward Jewish people or anti-Semitism in the word of the something like European context or etc. But I think this is this is a true moment for international people, including for Indonesia, because of the rise, many critical voice raised in social media. And I think there is shifting paradigm from merely previously that people who, propose Palestinian rights, Palestinian sovereignty only from the Muslim, but now we have more people from different different countries, different religion, different culture, etc., in order to have, defended Palestinian rights in their places more properly. So if we look at, for example, at the two-state solution, this is also, proposed by President Trump, but I think this is not really what we have to do for the moment. Nah, and we are looking forward to the idea of confederation here proposed by Rabbi Yaakov. But if we look at the two-state solution, for example, as I said before, there is asymmetry of power between Palestinians and Israel people, and there is no way in order to, to propose this solution more advanced, because there is, I think, political dynamic inside Israel. There is very strong. If I correct me if I'm wrong, there is political dynamic inside Israel that many people want, or maybe wanted, I don't know, to create the Jewish state and also democratic state. But this is something like, contradictory in terminus, or because the problem in the real life is not like that. I mean, there is the problem of annexation, injustice, etc. And if we look at the Jewish state, I think it is impossible to be a democratic one. So this is the two-state solution is now something like absurd and impossible for me. So I don't want to continue to further, further points. I think it's enough for me for the moment, and I would like to listen more about the other enlightening perspective from other speakers as well, especially from Professor Naim Jina and other as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omam, for your insight and words regarding this situation. Yes, it's a very important part, Pa Omam, when we talk about, for example, the notions of coexistence, the notions of dialogue. What does that actually mean when we talk about the nuances of dialogue? What criteria fits into the idea of dialogue is an important step to understand. And perhaps when we talk about the asymmetry of power, maybe we should also find out and define, what does power actually mean? What does power actually represent? But at the end of the day, Pa Omam, what I can see from you is that the point is we have to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table and everyone has an equal level when sitting on the table. Now, it might be a little bit more complicated than that when we're just talking about it. But once again, Pa Omam, we respect your views. And yes, without further ado, Pa Omam, please do allow me to introduce our next speaker. So thank you very much, Pa Omam. Our next speaker is the Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Center in South Africa. We are very honored to be at his presence and to hear his thoughts. Please welcome everyone, Mr. Naim Jina. Mr. Naim Jina, how are you today? And how is South Africa?
Thank you, Rafi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Let me begin by 2 points. First, Andre, if you're watching Netflix, I think the movie that you really should be watching is The Present, a 24-minute movie that shows from a human perspective what Palestinians go through on a daily basis. And Rafi, you quoted Desmond Tutu earlier on, one of the fathers of human rights in South Africa, of course, and democracy. I prefer this quote of Tutu's. If you are neutral, Desmond Tutu says, Archbishop Desmond Tutu says, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. This was the wisdom, or is the wisdom, of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and I think that this is what will guide my remarks for today. I had a long speech prepared, but before the session started, I decided to change my speech. I am a South African who is in solidarity with the Palestinian people. My solidarity comes from the fact that I am human, I'm South African, and I'm Muslim. As someone who is in solidarity with an oppressed people, I prefer to listen to what the oppressed people have to say in terms of what they want, in terms of the solidarity. And from the Palestinian perspective, particularly, I listen to what is being asked by Palestinian civil society, and especially the BDS National Committee that is based in Ramallah, that is a coordinator globally of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, a non-violent campaign to end Israel's occupation. Let me say that the issue that we're talking about is not, as some speakers have said, it is not complex. It is actually very simple. The issue is also not about religion. This is not about Muslims against Jews or Jews against Muslims, which of course ignores completely the fact that about 12 to 15% of Palestinians are actually Christian. Islam and Judaism has nothing to do with this issue. This issue is not about disconnection. It's not, you know, if we talk together and made nice and smile, everything will be good. This is not about that. I'm South African. We had lots of connections between black and white people, and we were still killed by the white people. This issue actually is about colonialism, it is about occupation, and it is about apartheid. All three of which are defined by me in terms of international law. This is not something anyone pulls out of their pocket. Colonialism is illegal under international law. Occupation, long-term occupation, as we're seeing that Israel does in Palestinian territory, is illegal under international law. Apartheid is illegal under international law in terms of the Convention for the suppression and punishment of the crime of apartheid and the Rome Statute. This is what Israel is guilty of. Colonialism, occupation, and apartheid. Let's be clear about this. This is not about if we sing together, we'll be happy. Singing and dancing has nothing to do with the issue here. People are removed from their homes, people are massacred, and this is what we are talking about. And so don't tell us, please, that both Jewish Israelis and Palestinians suffer. You cannot compare the suffering of those who are occupied, colonized, and face racism and apartheid to the so-called suffering of those who perpetrate all of those injustices. And let me say that among the worst of the Jewish Israelis are the settlers. The settlers are among the worst. Of course, firstly, under international law, all settlements are illegal. All settlements are illegal. The settlers, we watch it on the news all the time. Settlers in the West Bank are guilty of uprooting olive trees that are hundreds and thousands of years old. They're guilty of destroying, burning the livestock of Palestinian people. They are guilty of poisoning the water of Palestinian people. Not too long ago, settlers in the West Bank killed a child, made him drink petrol and set him alight, a child. And I know Mr. Nagin will say that he organized a prayer meeting in support of that family. Prayer meetings don't do anything. These are settlers. This is what they did. Most recently, right now, we are seeing what the settlers are doing in Sheikh Jarrah, ethnic cleansing, and in Silwan, ethnic cleansing. When Nagin talks about this King David area where he has his interfaith activities, this area is Silwan, where people are being ethnically cleansed today. And among the worst of the settlers, I should say, are the settlers in Hebron. I implore people to watch YouTube videos about what settlers in Hebron do to the Palestinians there. You have a few hundred settlers in Hebron, in Khalil, with the correct name for it, guarded by a few thousand Israeli troops. In February 1994, the main masjid in Hebron, the Ibrahimi Masjid, was attacked by Baruch Goldstein, a settler in Hebron. He killed dozens, scores of people while they were praying the Fajr prayer in the masjid. Do you know what the response of the Israeli authorities was? The response of the Israeli authorities was that they divided that masjid into two and made one part of it a synagogue. Nagin talks in an interview about how his wife goes to the synagogue, this synagogue that is supposed to be a masjid. He says, he talks about how we should have a Palestinian state, but he is a settler living south of Hebron in an illegal settlement. How do we listen to someone who lives in a settlement, who is a settler, who is illegal even under international law? Now, this came to my notice just a little while before I got on this webinar. And this is the reason why I changed my speech. Because normally I will not speak on a platform with a settler who is one of the most racist people that you can come across. Rabbi Nagin lives in the settlement of Otniel, south of Hebron. He represents also a settler organization that builds schools and settlement infrastructure in the settlement of Gush Etzion. Now Gush Etzion too is illegal under international law. All of these settlements are destroying Palestinian lives, destroying Palestinian homes. They are destroying Jerusalem, they are destroying Khalil, Hebron, they are destroying Bethlehem. Bethlehem is surrounded on three sides by settlements and on one side by the wall. There's no possibility of that city expanding, growing. People who have children, their children have to leave because of these settlements. This is what settlers are. Palestinians have called on us not to normalize relations with settlers. I respect that call. I support boycotts, divestment, and sanctions, and I support the call not to normalize relations with settlers and settlement organizations. Let me say that I'm not fooled by this language of interfaith that comes across from racists and from settlers. I was part of the interfaith movement in South Africa for decades. We understood interfaith to be about people of religion, people of faith getting together to struggle together for justice, not to justify injustice and to justify oppression. Now, Rabbi Nagin might say that this is intolerant. No, what is intolerant is ethnic cleansing that we see taking place in Sheikh Jarrah. What is intolerant is the apartheid meted out to Palestinians all over Palestine. What is intolerant is the murder and repeated massacres that take place in Gaza, what Israelis call mowing the lawn, because they don't even regard people in Gaza as human beings. They just mow the lawn. He will say, I am against peace. I am South African. I know the value of peace. I know the value of democracy, and I don't see it in Israel. What I do see in Israel as a South African is apartheid. I am against injustice. I am against oppression. When Rabbi Nagin leaves his illegal settlement, which is on stolen land, and he goes back to his home in the United States, when he renounces the settlements, when he calls for the whole of the Ibrahimi Masjid to be returned to the Muslims, then I will invite him for a meal to my house. Until then, I cannot engage with him. I cannot be on the same platform as him. Now, after I had already joined this webinar, I received a message from Samir, the Palestinian who was supposed to be a participant in this. I want to read this brief message. Samir said, I cannot continue with an event that violates basic BDS principles. I grew up in the Fawar refugee camp just minutes away from where the Israeli speaker currently lives. We have never met and will likely never meet. That is because we live under two very different systems of life. There is no ethical coexistence here. This is the reality of apartheid. His mere presence in an illegal settlement is not only a violation of international law, but a violation of my basic human rights and right to live in dignity. I cannot, as a Palestinian in good conscience, ignore the land dispossession and killing of children as a result of settlers like our speaker today and pretend to focus on interfaith dialogue. Having said that, I want to call on the Alumni Forum to organize another event, one that is actually about interfaith relations in the struggle for justice. I will be very happy to participate in that, But for now, I cannot continue to remain on this platform, and I have to withdraw from this seminar. Thank you very much.
Mr. Naim Jinnah, I hear what you have to say, and I cannot speak for the Indonesian government, but I do hear your words and do see the facts and reality that we face when it comes to the conflict of, not the conflict, the situation between Israel and Palestine. And I do not want to assume the role of a mediator in any official way. It's not my right to do so. But I know that you will have to withdraw from this platform, and I respect your views and your values. Desmond Tutu would have always wanted us to fight for the principles, because fighting for what's right is worth it. But Mr. Naim Jinnah, I just want to say, if there is a huge violation in your view of international law, how should the international community act? And in this sense, how can we bring peace into the table as part of the discussion? How do you see peace, actually? I think that's a very important issue for us to at least understand.
Rafi, I would love to respond to your question, and I could discuss this for hours very calmly. But having been called upon by Palestinians to withdraw from this event, I really, as someone in solidarity, I cannot continue. I would love to continue with this discussion, because I think the question you're raising is more important than anything I've said, but I cannot. I'm sorry.
Very well. But as a courtesy, I think we'd like to thank you for your participation, albeit brief. But again, as Indonesia is a diverse country, we respect the values of everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for joining us, and have a good day. Goodbye. Before we move on to the next speaker, I think it would be unkind if I would brush off what has been said by Mr. Naim Jinnah. And I think it would be fair if I give Rabbi Yaakov again the opportunity to perhaps give his own views and perceptions on this issue. Would you like to respond perhaps very briefly, Rabbi?
I'm very grateful for that. And certainly I feel the authenticity of his pain. And I agree that, as I said at the beginning, I agree there's a lot, the reality of suffering, certainly by Palestinians. But I feel just there's so many points to respond to. I'll try to limit it. One issue, as I said, we need the 3 points that I mentioned earlier. The reality of Palestinian suffering, but there's also, I feel, close to the reality of also Jewish suffering. In my school, on Shabbat, 4 of my students were killed by terrorists. 3 homes where I live, there was a woman, Daphne Meir, when she murdered in her home by terrorists, we had to stay in our homes for hours, and my children have been dealing with post-trauma. So the realities of the suffering are very real. And if we listen to the pain of both sides, I think this will lead us to a way to deal with this. Another issue relating to the BDS, and maybe this is the last point, because there are many points to relate to. The reality of Jewish fear. The issue of, I think in Gaza, after the Gaza disengagement, one of the hope is all the Jewish settlers and so left Gaza. And this was the first step for having much of the West Bank to follow that. But the way the Israelis experienced leaving Gaza as leaving the settlers and the Jews, and then thousands of missiles that have made life very difficult and responding to many thousands of missiles, the Israelis feel there's no choice but to find a way to stop those missiles from coming. And the fear, for example, the peace camp that did believe even in a full Palestinian state and anti-settlements and the like were very hard-pressed to respond to the authentic fear that will the West Bank become like Gaza? Instead of Gaza being a source of missiles, the West Bank is 20 times larger. This fear is very real. And I feel that this fear is not dealt with in a productive way. We will not overcome it. I think Anwar Sadat, he achieved the peace with Israel by coming to Jerusalem, and he won over the hearts of the Israeli people. And it's because of Anwar Sadat, they felt overcoming the fear and to return the Sinai to the Egyptian people. But if this fear is not dealt with, it's existential fear. The Jewish people have the trauma of the Holocaust. They have the trauma of feeling that Iran wants to build nuclear missiles. So the fear is very, very real. And if this fear is not dealt with, the fear will just make people hold on tighter. And I feel the BDS, by boycotting and not engaging, this increases the fear. And I think BDS, it is legitimate because BDS is a non-violent movement, and this makes it legitimate. But the result is creating more fear. And if Israelis fear that we'll be killed by missiles, we'll be destroyed, the trauma of the Holocaust, they will not have the courage to make the changes that are necessary. So I feel, unfortunately, the BDS is a self-defeating. And I know thousands of Palestinians. Many support the BDS, and this is their right. This is a non-violent movement. But many others do not believe in this path. So I think BDS talks for some of Palestinian society, but not for all of Palestinian society. So that's some of the few points that I would mention. But there, again, I want to hear the other people, so I really will try to hold back many comments that I could have made.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi,
Thank you
for responding.
And thank you for your generosity, your sensitivity, Rafi, to allow me this opportunity.
I believe we should be sensitive to all sides of the conversation, Rabbi, and we should give an opportunity for all voices to be heard. Having said that, thank you, Rabbi, for responding. I'd like to give the opportunity for the Vice Chair of the Alumni Association of Universitas Indonesia, ILUNI UI, Mr. Sofyan Al-Bana, the opportunity to speak next. Mr. Al-Bana, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rafi, and good night and good evening, everyone. And very happy today to participate in this discussion. And I think we should start with putting the discussion in the right context. I think, how to say, the discussion should focus on what is actually happening rather on the assumption that this conflict stems from something that is permanently etched in the heart of everyone. I mean, like, before 1880s, there were Jews, Muslims, and Christians living in Jerusalem. And the tensions started to arise when there was immigrations and taking over of lands, which then creates tensions in Palestine, which lead later to what we call as Nakba, the disaster in 1948, where 2/3 of all Palestinians were pushed from their homes and cannot return until today, despite the call from the international society through the United Nations on the right to return of the Palestinians, which was repeated for more than 100 times at the United Nations and agreed by all countries except Israel and the United States. So I think we need to really focus on that problem, the problem of occupation, the problem of dispossession of Palestinians, which is the basis of Indonesia's position in the Palestine issue. So Indonesia's position in Palestine issues is not based on identity. We do not reject Israeli position because of its identity as Jew. We are, like Indonesians, are not against Israel because of the religion or any identity, but because of this reality of settler colonialism, in which Indonesia has a very strong experience with colonialism. Our constitution started with a strong statement on colonialism, and thus consistently from the period of Sukarno, the first president of Indonesia, Indonesia clearly made it a statement on this. So if I say something criticizing Israel here, I'm not against you personally, Rabbi, not against your religion. I am, as somebody who is studying international political economy and studying different types of colonialism, I have the moral responsibility to say that colonialism is wrong, dispossession, violent dispossession of people's home, as what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah, where it is still continuing despite recent ceasefire. The Supreme Court refused to intervene in the case and argue that, and those trying to legalize this dispossession into a property issue, a property claim issue, while first of all, the Israeli court has no jurisdiction in East Jerusalem. So when Antony Blinken said that Palestinians should seek justice and when we reject ICC, which is an international body, which I do think, if Israel is confident with his moral army, I think they should accept ICC to look at the possible violations on both sides and then see say that I do not do humanitarian crime, I don't do apartheid. If you do not allow people to objectively see what is actually happening, you cannot also ask people to be in connection if it is the settlers and the Israeli policy supported by the military and the police, which is actually making these connections by building illegal settlements continuously and carving up the areas in West Bank and then separate Palestinian villages and make them make Palestinians go through a different road when they are going outside and force them to go into checkpoints and then unfairly treating them in those checkpoints. So I think peace is a beautiful thing. Tolerance is a beautiful thing. However, it is often abused and misplaced if we do not really address the root of the problem. So I think that is what we have to deal today. Settlements continue, illegal settlements, despite Oslo, continue to grow. And of course, this is illegal under international law. And despite the illegality, the Israeli military continues to protect the settlers. We can see it on many platforms right now, pictures and videos of Israeli settlers bringing Uzi and abusing Palestinian children, and then protected by the military. A Palestinian girl was in her home and shot from outside. People in Palestinian villages have their olive trees burned regularly. And I think these are the reality that Palestinians face, and peace will only possible when this reality of occupation is dismantled. We will talk peace if the illegal settlements were dismantled. It will be nice to talk about peace when the apartheid system, which the Human Rights Watch convincingly said that Israel is implementing apartheid, is dismantled. So I think talk about peace, connection, love will only be possible if the occupation ends, if the settler colonialism and its violence, which happens regularly, stop, if the dispossession of lands of Palestinians is stopped, when the rights to return for Palestinians is respected. And I think in that position, we stand. So this is not about personal issue, Rabbi. This is and not about identity. This is about justice. We see that the oppression, the discrimination continuously going, and I think we need to deal with that. And as an Indonesian, I am proud with Indonesia's position right now. And I do not think normalization is the way to go for Indonesia, because I think Israel needs pressure to ensure that they can be taken as responsible. I mean, like currently they are doing a lot of humanitarian crimes. And I think it's not me personally saying this. I think UN even recently recorded several increasing violence by settlers. Only in these few months, more than 100 Palestinians were hurt by settlers, and we do not see any legal consequence towards these settlers, and even the Palestinians who are resisting this violence are captured. So I think, with that situation, I think it's pretty clear where Indonesia should stand. Again, we must differentiate between Jews and Zionists. We, of course, we support interfaith dialogue, tolerance, etc. But this should be based on the respect of human as human. And thus all humanitarian crimes must stop. And I think Israel need to be warned of this. If Indonesia normalize its relationship, the power balance will be less in favor of Palestinians. And I think it is in favor of humanity, in favor of peace, in favor of tolerance that Indonesia remains not having a formal relationship with Israel. It is, I think, this is the position that we should take. Thank you very much for the opportunity. May peace prevail. May real peace with justice prevail. Thank you.
Inshallah.
Thank you, Mr. Shafian Albanan. You placed a very factual and important topic, and calls upon the idea of it's not a question of identity, it's not a question of faith, it's a question of justice, it's a question of accountability, and it's a question of bringing justice into light and making sure that accountability is a priority. And how international law, at the end of the day, as I stated before, should be exercised in its most legal and coherent manner. Thank you so much to the esteemed panels. I have appreciated the diverse views. And now I would like to leave it to the floor and open a question and answer session. We have a lot of questions that have been coming to me personally, but sadly, because we are so limited only for the time, I'm wary of the time, we can only have 3 questions. So Rabbi, Mr. Umam, and Mr. Albanan, give me the opportunity to try and see what kind of questions are we getting at the moment. So I think we can start with, give me a moment. We have a flurry of questions that I have to take a look at. So we have a question from Mr. Irwan S. And I think this is if we look at this in a more humanitarian approach, the question is there any possibility for Jews and Muslims to reinterpret their Torah or Quran to change perception about each other? Is there room for reinterpretation, or is reinterpretation not the whole point of the situation? Mr. Umam, would you like to weigh in on this question?
Yeah, so thank you very much for the question. Actually, this is the question not related to our topic, but maybe we need to separate other topics in terms of, for example, interfaith dialogue more specifically, and also we can invite Dr. Naim actually about this topic. But I think that there are a lot of things to do, but to reinterpret the Torah and also the Quran related to the perception about Muslim among Jews, or perception about Jews in the Muslim tradition. There are a lot of things to read in the Islamic tradition from the classical times until the modern period. And I think there is no, there are a lot of common links between Muslims and also Jews, especially as proposed by many ulama and scholars, including within Islam and also inside a lot of rabbis. There are a lot of, reinterpretation what was going on between, what was happening in the history. In fact, what we have to do for the moment is we need to I think, look at the history more clearly. What I mean by this is that during the classical or pre-modern history of Islam, there was no, I think, persecution and also opposition to the Muslim, I mean, to the Jews in the Islamic civilization, especially from the Umayyad times until the Ottoman Empire. So, if we want to compare with the European Christianity at that time, Jews were persecuted. Jews were oppressed in the Latin Christendom, for example. But in the Muslim lands, there was relatively lot of tolerance and coexistence between Muslims and Jews, and this kind of coexistence, it's not only in the context of the real life, social life, but also in the context of intellectual, something we call intellectual encounters. So there was reinterpretation or reception of the Greek philosophy from the of course from the Greece, from the Greek tradition coming to the Muslim, and then the Jewish philosopher, Jewish thinkers also received many things from the Muslim tradition. Someone like from the time of Al-Ghazali until the time of the Rambam, so the Maimonides from the 12th until from the 11th until the 12th century, for example. This is only one example. Of course, there are a lot of things to look at the Baghdad example as well. How there were a lot of the flourishes of the intellectual progress between Muslim and Jews. They were cooperating each other. Even there were a lot. If we look at the current contemporary period in our society, for example, someone Indonesian, for example, fear about having wali kota, governor, or etc., who are non-Muslim. So in the case of the classical Islam, it is not only like that. There are a lot of ministers who were Christian, who were Jews, cooperated with Muslim to administer the state, to administer the, let's say, caliphate in our terms. But there's no problem. I think the problem for the moment is with regard to the question of the interfaith and intercultural dialogue, is how to interpret the Torah and also the Quran with the question of the justice, adalah. I don't know exactly about the term adalah in Hebrew. I think maybe the cognate terminology should be the same. But if we think semantically about this issue, this is very clear. This is the question of humanity. This is the question of, how we, live each other to, to create more meaningful peace in terms of as our discussion goes tonight, in order to eliminate the discrimination, the settler colonialism, and also the apartheid system, which becomes the burdens of the connection, the relation between Jews and Muslim in particular, but also to look at the more in the context of nation states. So I think there are a lot of rooms to reinterpret our scriptures. There are a lot of texts in Ghazali, for example, in Islam, Ibn Rus, but also in the Jewish tradition, the epigon or the example of Rambam is very clear. There is progress between these thinkers, and between Muslim and Jews in the modern life, they rely heavily on the interpretation of both these thinkers. I think we need to think more about the common platform of, or if we have in the Quran, for example, kalimah sawa. This is also one of the important point in the Abrahamic, something like Abrahamic dialogue. But as we said before, that we need to direct this dialogue into the question of justice, I think, which will be more properly, humanly, but also I think, to support our, our struggle, not only for Palestinians, but also for the sake of humanity in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Umam. You have given such a holistic answer, looking at it in the context of history, culture, and then going back into the idea of humanity and how justice should prevail. Now, once again, we are limited by time, but I would like to give the opportunity for perhaps one of our participants to open their mic by raising their hands and asking the question personally, but please bear in mind that as moderator, I'm not here to share my views, but I'm here to make sure that decorum is a priority. So I want everyone to be as polite as possible. So yes, I see Mr. Evan Putro is raising his hand. Mr. Evan, you have a question? Mr. Evan Putro? Bapak Evan Putro? Okay. It seems like we have lost him, but does anyone like to raise their hand and perhaps ask a question? Yes, Mr. Niruban Balachandran. I hope I've said that correctly. Mr. Niruban, you have the floor. Please ask your question, sir. It seems that Mr. Niruban is not able to. Yes. Hello.
Okay. I was able to unmute.
Great. Hi.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to to listen to you all and have a robust discussion. My question is something that I pasted in the chat. Indonesia in the past has officially released statements condemning terrorist attacks on masjid and gereja, for example, in 2018 in Surabaya, in Christchurch, New Zealand, in Sri Lanka. Indonesia condemned all of those attacks. However, there were terrorist attacks in 2018 in Pittsburgh, in 2019 in Poway, San Diego, and Halle, Germany. And there were terrorist attacks in Vienna and last month in Jerusalem, and other ones around the world. These terrorist attacks were on Jewish synagogues or Jewish institutions, but Indonesia said nothing. In April, there was the Mount Meron tragedy, the Stampede tragedy, which, dozens of people were killed or injured, but Indonesia said nothing, even though most of the main Muslim majority countries condemned or they sent their sympathies and condolences, even the Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, also sent sympathies and condolences to Israel for the Mount Meron tragedy. But Indonesia said nothing. So my question is, why does the government of Indonesia claim that rejecting Israel is not about religion? When it comes to Jewish institutions being attacked, Indonesia feels that that Jewish lives matter less than Palestinian lives. But if we're talking about humanity, it should be everyone. So my question to anyone actually is, why does the government of Indonesia not condemn these attacks? And why does it claim that rejecting Israel is not about religion? Because it clearly is a factor. Judaism is being rejected or ignored by the government of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Niruban Balachandran, for your question. So, at the end of the day, that I see that question is essentially asking, is Indonesia being fair when it comes to its stance? Is there a double-edged sword? Maybe Mr. Albanan, could you address this?
Yes, thank you very much. I have no pretension of being a representative of Indonesian government because I'm obviously just a citizen of Indonesia who is deeply committed to Indonesia's founding principle of Pancasila, which put humanity in its second principle. So I think we need to go with that. Well, if we ask all states to condemn all violations or attacks to religious places of worship, and then accusing all of these governments of being failed, of being fair, then maybe we should also ask why all European countries, or maybe the United States are silent when there are demolitions of homes, of places of worships, of hospitals, of kindergartens, of UN-backed installations, of press buildings like the AP. Why do these governments are silent? Are they being racist? Do they not consider Palestinians as humans? So I think in the case of Indonesia, I think the position is clear. Indonesia continuously condemn terrorist attacks, and maybe it is not how to say, not all. Maybe you missed these condemnations. Maybe we just do not hear this condemnation loud enough. But I do think Indonesia have this. I mean, you mentioned the Vienna attack. I do think that Indonesian government sent a strong statement on that. I need to check about all others, so I cannot claim with 100% certainty now. But I'm pretty sure that Indonesia is sending its condolences and also its condemnation towards terrorist attacks. However, when you mention about, for example, about the attacks towards Palestinians, then we can also maybe ask the United States to, and maybe European countries to then have to be asked similar question. Why don't they condemn those attacks? Why don't they strongly condemn the destruction of people's home? Why don't they condemn the collective punishment? Not only a bombing of a single place of worship. All places of worship in Gaza is blockaded, and more than half of the people in Gaza could not have a food security. And I think UN reports clearly show this. Even the fishermen cannot go to fish after they reach several miles and attacked by the military. So I think if you ask for condemnation for every attacks, then we need to ask US and European countries to condemn the attacks on Palestinians every day. Or maybe, if following your logic, we can also say US and Europe may be racist, maybe not committed to humanity, maybe. I don't know. I'm not saying that. I'm just following your logic. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Albanan. it's really almost like a chicken and egg scenario, and it will only lead to more finger pointing if we continue this circle. But of course, it's an important issue to always understand the nuances of the stances of the Indonesian government. And I thank you, Mr. Albanan, as an expert and academic for, in a sense, giving us that nuance. I know that there are lots of questions that we have that we have in our roster, but this is the final question from Mr. Evan Putro. Mr. Evan Putro, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Rafi, for the opportunity. So, hello, everyone. Good evening, Erev Tov from Jakarta. Yeah, so I'd like, it's actually, I want to comment on the, about the whole discussion that we have tonight, and also to, at the end of my session, to ask questions. So, I mean, as an Indonesian Jew, I mean, as an ultra minority living in Indonesia, I've seen a lot of like act of anti-Semitism every time that this Israeli-Palestinian conflict arises, and especially when it's covered by either from international or local media. And I remember there one time that the only synagogues in Jakarta was, no, it's not in Jakarta, sorry, it was in Java, in Surabaya, I remember. It was, so it was, the synagogue was raided because it flew the flag of Israel, and then it replaced it by Palestinian flag. So though I wasn't living there in Surabaya, but I mean, I could see that, how to say, the tendency of people when they reacted to this situation is that I don't think most of the people really could realize and see that. I mean, the definition, how to say, the hatred is blurred between anti-Semitism and between criticizing Israel. So one thing that I also noticed that because the lack of knowledge of perhaps mostly Indonesian in terms of like to see Israeli or Palestinian people from the ground. I mean from the human level instead of like from what each government trying to do. It just I noticed there's lacking on that part, and people just growing their what would you call it again? It's like their thoughts. I mean their assumption of other people just because of what people were thinking about. All with the hatred that's been spread, which is not true. And so I mean I think and back to I mean what I want to ask. I mean I also saw several Jewish Indonesians here on the panel, and I'm just curious to all the panels here. I just want to ask, especially Rabbi Yaakov Nagin, can you please give us an advice on how the word youth Jewry have to act against the rising anti-Semitism every time this rising conflict between Israeli and Palestinian happens in the future, or perhaps you can also give us some kind of how to say experience in terms of like engaging people, especially for people from the faith, between two religions or more, about how to create this kind of like a safe space for both people to engage and to listen to each other, because that's an important thing. If one doesn't want to listen to the others and always feel that they're the most correct one, I think there won't be like it won't be a constructive towards a peace building in the region. I think that's what I can ask. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Evan. So just to perhaps summarize to what Mr. Evan has said, it seems that he believes that peace building, in a sense, is clouded by the sense of anti-Semitism that we see rising. Am I correct, Mr. Evan?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Because I mean, there's like blurry lines between being critical to Israel and anti-Semitism.
Okay, so you believe that there is a bias between wanting to build peace, but at the same time we are blurred in the sense of anti-Semitism or other religious views. Okay, I would like to give the floor to Rabbi Nagin. Rabbi, based on what Mr. Evan has said, how would you respond to this? And indeed, what would be your advice on this in this matter, Rabbi?
Okay, well, thank you for the question, Evan. So I'll try to respond. And then if you please, I would like to add some final words after that.
Yes.
One reason why Jews feel that there is, this is about anti-Semitism and not only about criticism of Israel, two reasons. First of all, when there's violence between Israeli and Palestinians, Jews throughout the world who are not Israelis, not necessarily even pro-Zionists, will find themselves being attacked in different places in the world. In New York, there are many Jews sitting in restaurants outside and videos of being attacked and feeling that if Italy does something, you don't necessarily have Italian Americans being attacked in the streets because of things done in a different country. Another issue is that, as I said, when you say the words BDS, those three letters, everybody knows it's talking about Israel. Unfortunately, we know that Israel is also, I think, as every country, is an imperfect society. But unfortunately, our world has so many deeply repressive regimes. And one question the Jewish people ask, if there's one country in the world which ultimately, with its imperfections and whatever this people think, it's a democracy where Arabs vote, you could have a different view, but why is it is not Burma, it is not Syria, it's so many repressive countries. Why is it always the one Jewish country in the world which is the source of such obsession? The United Nations spends so much of its energies on one tiny country with a painful conflict. I live here, so this is the most important issue in my life. Also, to caring about my Muslim and Palestinian brothers, but in the world, it's such a big place. This obsession leads to a fear that there's something bigger at play here. So this is why Jews sometimes feel that have this concern. In terms of dealing with it, I feel, again, the issue about the blame game, who is right and who is wrong, this will not lead us anywhere. On campuses, sometimes there are debates, I know in America, between pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian. Certainly, but I feel if it becomes a shouting match, this will not overcome the hatred. But I do feel I think it's not just something sweet, connection before connection. I think this is an essential healing and there are many projects that I think that we should feel with our disagreements, as I quoted Rumi, beyond ideas of right thinking, beyond ideas of wrong thinking. There is a field, there we will meet. And I do feel, Rafi, if I can, a few words to respond in general. Again, I feel we are an imperfect society, and it is deeply painful to me that there are Jewish extremists, and this is true, that do acts of violence, and as there are Islamic extremists who do act of violence. But I feel this is misinformation to feel that these are things that are ignored. I mean, Israel um, these acts of violence are generally very much condemned, and we try to catch the perpetrators. So let me just tell you what I did today before I came here. I was told that a week ago in a Palestinian farm near where I live, there were the hay that was put together for the sheep, and somebody in the middle of the night lit it and burnt down the hay. And the police investigated, but we know that for this Palestinian farmer, this is what his flock needs to eat. Without this, unfortunately, I fear that maybe this was a Jewish extremist who did it. I don't know. But the bottom line is, this family does not have the hay they need for their sheep. So Jews who heard about this story, we collected a total of 50,000 shekels, which is about $15,000, and we brought it to the family because they need this hay. So true, there are bad people who are doing violence, but this isn't a one-dimensional story. And when we focus on one aspect, it leads to a false view of the realities. So this is one point to realize. Yes, I fight against these acts of violence, and they're terrible. But it is not true that society ignores it and does not prosecute. Another point, and my last point, because I know time is rushed, is one issue is there is a fundamentally different way, the way that some Palestinians see the Jewish presence in the Middle East, in the Holy Land, and how Jews perceive it. And somehow this has to be discussed. We heard before a narrative that Jews are white colonialists that have come to colonize a different land. But in a Jewish perspective, Jews do not they see themselves as indigenous because they never had another home. True, they were scattered around the world, but no place ever became their home. And in Jewish prayer and every ritual was always about returning one day to our land. So I acknowledge and respect the Palestinian connection to the land, the Muslim, the Arab connection. But with that respect and acknowledgement, the other side, the way Jews perceive it, it is not white colonialists the same way that Europe entered so many places, but we see ourselves as also indigenous people who have come back. So these two truths must somehow be connected. Jews must and should acknowledge the deep connection of Palestinians, Arabs, and whether Muslim or Christians to the Holy Lands. But I feel that Palestinians must also acknowledge that the Jewish people in the land of their forefathers are not an alien white Western colonialists. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. At the end of the day, what I see from Rabbi Dr. Yaakov Nagin is that peace should prevail and dialogue should be a primary source of a platform to continue. And thank you for the final word on this, Rabbi. I'd like to give also a chance for Mr. Umam, the final word from you on this discussion.
Thank you very much for having me here. And I think people now are smarter to absorb information and also to shift the paradigm for maybe previously opposing Israel because of religion, but now people are smarter, and then I think they have many reasons, especially humanity, etc. Right? I think we need also to emphasize here that the anti-Semitism in the Muslim world, and especially in Indonesia, was not really the product of the, I think, was not the product of the Muslim society itself. It was the product of the modern, fabrication from the European history. from the late 19th century until the 20th century. We know about the history of Dreyfus, for example, until in the France, 19th century France, until the history of, you know, Hitler in the 1940s, from the 1930s to 1940s. I think, and then they came to the issue of anti-Semitism came to, or being imported to the Muslim world during this period. Of course, if one want to say that this is a complex history, it is, but in the simple word, we need to clarify ourselves, we need to educate ourselves that anti-Semitism was part of the modern history of Europe. And I think with regard to the bit, especially for Muslims and Indonesian Jews here, we need also to educate ourselves about the, you know, difference between the classical and modern period. There was no single black and white history between Jews and Muslims, etc., between hatred and love. That Jews, you know, for example, teach hatred, etc. This is not true, of course. I think the most important thing for the two societies, especially in Indonesia, between Muslim and the rising community of Jews, because the descendant coming from the, for example, I think Jewish family during the Dutch colonial period, and they becoming more important or aware of being Jews in today's life. I think it is good. And the more important thing is that not only we need to, as I said before, educate about the past history, but also we need to maybe to, I think, to strengthen and the common link between the struggle for humanity and peace. This is also maybe we need to criticize, because I think there are a lot of, you know, information proposed by the proponents of Israel Indonesia. They are always, you know, how to say in English, menyamakan, to equalize between Israel as a state and Jews as a religion. So this is actually not really like that. So I think we need to be honest to ourselves that the question here is about, of course, oppression and also the equality and also justice for human being. I think that is our responsibility to educate ourselves in order to better, you know, as we need to, you know, as Rabbi Yaakov said before, for the, you know, interfaith dialogue between, especially between Jews and Muslim in Indonesia, it is not possible. So the possibility always there. We have a lot of things to cultivate, both through the scripture, through the history, and to the confluence in modern life. Thank you very much for having me the opportunity to talk here.
It's a pleasure, Mr. Umam. And what I find very interesting from your words, Mr. Umam, is the responsibility that we all have to educate others, but at the very most important core of it is to educate ourselves. And what I see as a very important tool that Mr. Umam has always brought into this discussion is going back through our history, going back to the cultural sentiments that really develop into where we are today. Because really, when we learn from the past, can we prepare for what we see today? And can we build for a better future? So it's important, I guess, it's almost like a public service announcement to everyone here to read history, know it, understand it. Only then can we develop policy that works for everyone. Okay, Mr. Sofyan, the final word for you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I think we are all same, wanting a true peace in Palestine and elsewhere. And the most, the biggest obstacle to peace is the continuing oppression and occupation. So I think this must be addressed the institutionalized violence supported by the state with with strong military weapons, which subjected Palestinians to violence every day. So I think without addressing that, without stopping the expansion of illegal settlements, without stopping the carving up of Palestinian lands and cutting them into separate enclaves, separate Bantustans, where then they are they have to go through checkpoints every day to just do their daily life. Yes, personally, of course, there are good people everywhere, but when violence, when discrimination is institutionalized, the problem is not in the individuals. The problem is in the institution, and thus we must address this institution of violence. And that is the root of the problem. Having said that, I have to say again that we must condemn any hatred towards people based on that identity. And of course, I commend Indonesian government if somebody wants me to do so, to ask Indonesian government to condemn all terrorist attacks against everyone. I do not have this objection with that, but I also expect that we really focus on the problem. We really see the problem, and I think the problem is very clear. The reality of occupation, the reality of systematic and massive violation of human rights, based, not only based on subjective or identity sentiments, but I think international organizations, legitimate international organizations, clearly provide evidence for these violations. So I think that's it. We need to address this. Only when such injustice were addressed, stopped, then a real peace can prevail. We have a bad experience with talks about peace. Diponegoro, one of Indonesian national hero, was invited for a peace talk. And in that peace talk, Diponegoro was captured. So yeah, I think learning from that history, maybe we should not only look at superficial narratives, but really deal with the problem. If Rabbi, if you are really concerned with true peace, let us look at this reality of occupation. Let us look at this reality of the carving up of Palestinian areas and this and their oppression, which they experience every day. I think that's all, and hopefully we can really achieve peace in our lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shafian. True words, important words indeed. How can we really find peace into the edge of the horizon? It is really true understanding the notions of peace itself. Peace for who? The most important thing is peace for all of us, peace for mankind, and to make sure that really important dialogues and realities can be shown to light, opening the curtain, lifting the veil, and making sure that everyone has an important seat on the table. We have lots of questions coming in, and I am so sorry that we are not able to answer all the questions that we have at hand. However, I would like, as moderator, have the final word on this discussion by communicating some key messages. Rabbi, Mr. Shafian, Mr. Umam, if you may allow me. Number one, through this discussion, I think it's inherently clear that this source of conflict or issue that we have must be viewed in a humanitarian perspective. where dialogue and discussion should sit at the heart of the situation. 2, an arms conflict and violence is not an option, and that should not be continued in Israel nor in Palestine. Violence is not the solution. 3rd, we believe in diplomacy as an important tool to foster greater dialogue, and we firmly believe that the notions of a two-state solution must be pursued in any sort of manner, might it be in the notions that have been discussed in this forum. At any case, international law should be considered, international law must be exercised, and international platforms must be utilized, whether in the form of interfaith dialogue or in more nuanced and specific terms, such as really what is the crux of the solution. Now, I would love to have all the answers in my cue cards. Sadly, I don't. But as what Sofian has said, let's hope that in our lifetime, we might see a future ahead for this world, actually. Or at the very least, Mr. Sofian, your wonderful child could be the next leader who can head us all to the right direction. So with that, I would like to really close this, I would say rather, this dialogue has never been easy, but I'm sure every conversation will put us in the step to the right direction. So once again, I would like to thank Rabbi Dr. Yaakov Nagin. It's a pleasure to meet you. Let's hope we...
Very mutual, Rafi. You did a wonderful job on a difficult subject.
Oh dear. And it will continue to be difficult, but let's see if we can find common ground. That is, of course, yes, the dream of all democracies and all wonderful ideologies, all religions. Mr. Sofian, it was a pleasure to hear you speak. And Mr. Umam, I think I gotta chase some history books from you. So at any rate, I wish everyone a good night, a good morning, or a good afternoon. Thank you so much for listening to the Forum Diskusi Salemba. And I'll see you all very, very soon. Take care and have a great day. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.